Good morning, colleagues. We meet again on yet another difficult morning of load shedding. My name is Sikonati. I have with me on the line the Eskom Executive Management Team, which is going to give us an update and take us through the current load shedding. After this briefing, we will then publish a media statement to confirm the discussion. I humbly request everybody who does need any voice note or audio to use the conversation here for that purpose. We will, as I say, afterwards publish a media statement. I request all of you again, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, to type all your questions on the chat box and do everything you can to restrict them to questions about load shedding. We will answer every question that has been posed in that regard. I now call on Andre Director to give us an update. Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Sikonati, for that introduction. Thank you for joining us this morning. As you're all aware by now, Eskom regrettably had to implement stage 4 load shedding due to a significant shortfall in generation capacity, which we were unable to recover over the weekend. This is a really disappointing performance by generation, and we are doing our utmost to recover from that. The planned capacity that we have got out on maintenance sits at 5,124 megawatts, which is still a high number. Again, this is part of our efforts to ensure that we can restore some degree of reliability and predictability to the system. We have very high unplanned full losses at 11,164 megawatts. We have partial load losses of 4,158 for a total unplanned loss factor of 15,672, which is unacceptably high and has led to the implementation of stage 4 load shedding. The load forecast for peak this evening is 29,988. So there is a significant shortfall in available generation capacity, and we therefore have no alternative but to implement stage 4 load shedding to shed about 4,000 megawatts of demand in order for us to safely navigate through the current demand on the system in order to prevent a total collapse of the system. Just to remind everybody what a total blackout would mean, the system operates at 50 hertz frequency. This is so-called alternating current, and you can regard this as the heartbeat of the system. And when that heartbeat goes too high or too low, then we have a significant risk to the system. Restoring that system once we have lost frequency will take a week or longer and will cause very substantial negative consequences for the economy. And therefore, unfortunately, when we are faced with these generation constraints, we are in the position of having to impose load shedding in order to safeguard the overall integrity of the system. We did not have as good an Easter weekend as we would have liked. The heavy rains did not assist. We have been experiencing at certain of our power stations issues with coal that has become too wet to handle, and when the coal is fed down the chute into the boilers, it tends to cause blockages and it tends to stick. and this has caused us to suffer some load losses. In other instances, we were just not able to bring back units as planned. From a reserves capacity, the situation at this point in time is that at Ankerlig, we are sitting at 67% of diesel in our tanks. Again, this is not ideal. We'd like that number to be north of 80%. So we are expecting delivery of about 129 diesel trucks during the course of today that will replenish those reserves. At Gerikwa, again, Gerikwa has significantly larger storage, also off-site, and is connected by a pipeline to those storage facilities, so we don't have the same logistics constraints that we have at Ankerlig. We have 82% diesel levels. So at this point in time, we are running Gerikwa to supplement the generation shortfall, but we are not running Ankerlig in order to preserve our capacity there. We have not recovered as well as we would have liked to at Drakensberg. Drakensberg still has 51 pump hours in order to replenish the upper dam. And then we have been able to improve the performance at Ingula. Ingula now only requires another 12 hours to be fully replenished, and that will go a long way in order for us to safeguard that particular reserve. To overcome the shortfall in generation capacity, it is important to emphasize that there are a number of steps that can be taken to add new capacity to the grid, bearing in mind that over the past 8 years, since 2014, there has not been any new procurement of generation capacity. Of course, we have been completing Medupi, Kusile, and Ingula, so that capacity has been added to the grid, but we have not had the successful completion up until bid window 5 recently, which is still in the process of being awarded for a period of 8 years. And that 8-year delay has caused a significant shortfall then in new capacity being added to the grid timeously. Of course, Eskom itself, under previous management, played a significant role in that regard by refusing to sign further IPP procurement programs, and that has come back, the decision has come back to haunt us where we are today. We do believe that there is about 200 megawatts of capacity that can be added from existing IPPs, which they have available from time to time. They are contractually limited from feeding that into the grid. We would urge the IPP office to accelerate its efforts to enable the contracts to be amended to add that capacity to the grid. We also think there's a further estimated 200 megawatts of capacity that can be added by allowing the existing IPPs to improve their plants and feed that into the grid. Again, with some minor regulatory amendments and decisions, we believe that this can be enabled. There's also between 200 and 300 megawatts of capacity that can be added by means of debottlenecking the electricity evacuation infrastructure, connecting existing IPPs to the grid. Eskom will expedite that and will enable that capacity to be added to the grid. Eskom has also launched a so-called standard offer for small generators to make bids to Eskom for 3-year contracts. There is some capacity available from private generators, and others are prepared to feed into the grid based on such a standard offer. This was approved by the Eskom board on the 3rd of August last year, and we are awaiting approvals from National Treasury, DMRE, and NERSA in order to implement that. And that should also go some way to allow us to add more megawatts to the grid. We are also aware that there are very onerous registration requirements for the so-called embedded or own generation less than 100 megawatts. These requirements are imposed by NERSA. We are aware that NERSA is reconsidering those requirements. And again, it would be very helpful if those requirements would be relieved and relaxed in order to allow the quickest possible addition of new generation capacity to the grid in the shortest possible time. I may just add at this point that we are delighted with the response that Eskom has had to its leasing offer for Mpumalanga land. We saw a very well attended bidders call. I'm informed that there were some 64 parties on the call, so that indicates very substantial appetite. However, there are some stringent zoning and environmental impact assessment requirements that could delay the addition of that capacity to the grid. And again, it would be very helpful if those requirements were to be relaxed or expedited on an urgent basis. There are also constraints that Eskom faces on procurement. There is a request that is presently under consideration by National Treasury for certain exemptions from the PFMA. Again, these would be very helpful for us to procure spares, but in order to procure spares, we of course need money. And the 47 billion rand that we are owed by delinquent municipalities would be immensely useful for us to be able to relieve some of the liquidity constraints that we face. Just over the past year, we have not been paid an estimated 7.2 billion rand from these municipalities, which would have been very helpful in allowing us to carry out our planned maintenance without having to delay these owing to liquidity constraints. So there are a number of steps that can be taken on an urgent basis by a number of parties. Clearly, stage 4 load shedding is a call to arms to address these issues and to ensure that we can take all the steps that are necessary to bring the system to a much greater degree of reliability. The current performance of the system is disappointing and not acceptable. Again, I can give you the assurance that our generation teams are working very hard, very long hours, under difficult conditions. But within these constraints, we believe that there are some low-hanging fruit that we can implement in order to bring some relief to the system in the shortest possible period of time. At this point in time, I would like to hand over to our Group Executive Generation, Philip Dukashe. I see that he's also on the call. Philip, if you can give us some more color on the performance of individual units and what the outlook is for new capacity to come back online. Philip, please.
Thanks, Andre. Good morning, everyone. So just to go back a little bit and explain part of the reason why we are finding ourselves in this situation. We've had a very cold, long weekend. We were hoping during this weekend that we are going to be covering and catching up on some of the maintenance that needed to be done. We had communicated last week the number of units that were at risk. It was around 10,000. And we needed to take some units off in order to be able to work on them. But on a consistent basis, the demand was much higher than what the forecast was. And as a result, we were not able to take some of the units out for maintenance. Now, unfortunately, some of them happened to take themselves off. Just to give an indication, for instance, starting on Friday, the demand was about 700 megawatts higher than forecast. and then on Saturday 1,687, and then on Sunday 1,200. Now that is significant, and that impacted the planning. As a result, the units that were queuing up for maintenance to be done, we were not able to take off. Some of those units have now unfortunately taken themselves off, number of cube leaks, a number of other plant risks that we are dealing with. And that is the result why we're finding ourselves in this situation. The other thing is the rain, the persistent rain that we have. So we have plans to curb rain, to manage rain, to manage through the risk posed by the rain, particularly in our coal stockyards and so on. But if you're going to have rain persistent for more than 5 days, and even after that, it's not dry, you continue to have some rain, it poses a major issue. So some of our units impacted by rain, we have to constantly support them using fuel oil. And sometimes we lose combustion as a result of wet coal. So, we've got problems with flowing of coal. So these are things that I think we've managed well in the first bout of rain that we had. But if that rain is consistent, then our ability to manage becomes very difficult. We are still worried about units at risk because we have not really reduced that as we are hoping to do so. We are currently sitting in excess of 11,000 megawatts. So these are units at risk that can give at any stage. We can have failures at any stage, and we're trying to nest them, and we're hoping that we will get through. In terms of units coming back, so we have a plan in terms of megawatts and when units will be coming back, and we are hoping to be in a better position by Thursday evening, based on the units that will be coming back over this week. So we will be in a better situation around about Thursday evening, and then Friday, and then we are hoping that we will reassess and see. But we believe that the opportunity to stop load shedding will be there certainly by Thursday evening, Friday morning. That's where I will leave it for now, Andre. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. Sikonati, I think it's time for us to go to questions.
Indeed. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Philip. You have just, Philip, answered the question that I think is foremost in people's minds. When do we think load shedding can be suspended? And please repeat what you have just said about Thursday or Friday. So
we believe that we'll be in a position to assess on Thursday evening. Obviously, demand tends to drop on Friday. So probably if things improve, we will then assess on Friday morning as to when we should be stopping. At this stage, best case, that will be stopping load shedding sometime during Friday. That also depends, though, on how well we can replenish our reserves, because that is important. As we prepare for the start of the next week, we would like to have all our diesel and all our pump storage in a healthy state. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Philip Dugashe. He is the Group Executive for Generation. Now I'm going to read your questions, starting with Lamis Omaje from Fin24. Given the outages, is this a new record for unavailable generation capacity? Philip, Andre, remember yesterday we topped 17,000 megawatts. Is that a record for new unavailable capacity? That's the question. And are we heading for stage 6 load shedding? What is the load shedding outlook for winter? What is the cause of the breakdowns, both new and old? That particular question, I think you have just answered, Philip. Would the flooding and resulting damage in KwaZulu-Natal to infrastructure negatively impact Eskom's access to diesel? Philip, please, can you take those?
Thanks for the questions. No, this is not the highest. This is not a new record for unavailability of generation. We have been close to 18,000 megawatts at some stage. Currently, we are around 15,000 megawatts. So no, this is not the highest, but it always depends on what the demand is on the day, and that is why load shedding would then be introduced in order to balance the supply, the available supply with the demand. The second question is, are we heading for stage 6 load shedding? We do not see that happening in this week. Obviously, you know, one we cannot say for sure where things will be, but in terms of where we are, we do not see that happening this week. As we say, we expect some units coming back tomorrow. We expect some big units also coming back on Thursday, and that will certainly assist us and ensure that we recover from where we are. So at this stage, no, we do not foresee that there will be a need for stage 6 load shedding, at least definitely not this week. Load shedding outlook for winter, maybe if Sekgomatso is connected, maybe he will deal with that. If I can just deal with the last question with the flooding and resulting damage to infrastructure in case that negatively impact Eskom's access to diesel. Not so much diesel, fuel oil, certainly we are battling, and we are not getting enough supply, but we've made plans, we've made contingency plans, so at this stage we are not getting the full supply. On diesel as well, yes, it does have an impact, and our ability to replenish is slightly slower than the norm. But I think contingency plans have been made, so that should not be a major issue to contend with at this stage. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. Sekgomatso, are you able to give us, please, any update as to the outlook for load shedding during the winter?
Good morning, Sekgomatso. Thank you very much. Apologies, I'm not on camera. I'm working off my phone. And so it will be a bit unstable to switch on the camera. We have done the assessment for winter, and I think the big variable is the level of unplanned. We normally look at 3 scenarios, and at the last briefing, I think we did give an indication that if we're able to contain the unplanned below 12,500 megawatts, we should be not have any load shedding. Obviously, today we are struggling to achieve the lower level of unplanned that we desire, and it progressively increases to 37 days for winter, and in the extreme could be as high as I think we had about 101 days, but that is clearly very far in the extreme. So the main issue is that we have to redouble our efforts to contain the unplanned generation losses. Thank you, Sekgomatso.
Thank you, Sekgomatso. Again, ladies and gentlemen, that's Sekgomatso Skiepers. He is head of the Transmission Division, soon to be National Transmission Company, South Africa. The next question comes from Clyde Mellinson. Given that Eskom is not in control of any new procurement, when can we expect a media briefing from the DMRE on what real emergency plans are being put in place to tackle the supply shortfall? Clyde, I will answer that question myself and give a bit of a background as well. The DMRE is the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and they are not represented in this media briefing. May I humbly request you to direct the question to the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy as to when are they, what are the real emergency plans, and when are they being put into place to tackle the supply shortfall? Colleagues, that question, the Electricity Regulation Act of 2006 requires the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to conduct the procurement of any new generation capacity. And when Eskom is not being asked to procure any energy, that is being done through the IPP office. Please do direct your questions, Clyde, and everyone else who is interested in that particular question to the DMRE. Thank you. The next question comes from Ryan Brothwell of Business Tech. What is the short-term outlook for load shedding this week? It was originally scheduled to end on Wednesday. Ryan, Philip has now answered that question. I'm going to move to the next one, please. Lungile Msomi is from Tech Central. Will the increased occurrence of load shedding mean that Eskom will push for the introduction of renewable energy? Lungile, Eskom has what it can do internally, and that is to procure, or rather it has leased the land or has made land available in Mpumalanga outside of its power stations for anyone who can get their own customers to lease the land on a 20-year basis. The land will still be owned by Eskom and produce a maximum of 100 megawatts per project. That is what Eskom can do. As to the rest, beyond and above that, please do check with the DMRE or through the IPP office, as with the question above. There is Boniswa from Lesolle newspaper. How many megawatts are the small power generators likely to bring to the system? What challenges does Eskom face when going after municipalities that don't pay on time? Andre, do you have a forecast on what the IPPs can do insofar as the Eskom project, the RFP that is out now, please?
Thanks, Sugunati. So the RFP has not been issued. We have made inquiries to the market, but as I said, we are waiting for a variety of approvals from National Treasury, NERSA, as well as from DMRE to bring this online. This is about 500 to 600 megawatts, so not huge in the bigger scheme of things. But if you add up all of these initiatives that I alluded to in my introduction, we are looking at 1 or 2 stages of load shedding. And what is critically important, of course, is that the additional capacity will add more headroom for Eskom to carry out the much needed maintenance on its existing coal-fired fleet. So there is a good opportunity here for the market to solve some of the generation capacity shortfalls, provided that we cut the Gordian knot and we move forward with speed to resolving the electricity crisis. On the second one, Monde Bala, our Managing Director of our distribution business, is on the line. Monde, if you would like to talk about municipalities and what we can do to try and recover money from those.
Thanks. Thank you, Andre. Yeah, I think just to respond to that question, we are doing all in our powers to recover the money from the municipalities. We are actively working with them to ensure that they are in a position to pay us. Needless to say, it has been a big challenge, as Andre alluded to earlier. There's somewhat 7 billion that we have not been paid for this current financial year. We are working with National Treasury to find a sustainable solution, a structural solution to the challenge of the inability of municipalities to pay us. But we are supporting the municipalities in whatever way that we can to ensure that they are in a position to pay us. Thanks, Andre.
Thanks very much, Monde. Sugunati, if I can maybe just add one point on renewable energy, which I believe is related to the longer term future of the electricity supply industry in South Africa. There is, at this point in time, I believe, an important moment for us to pivot from our historical coal-fired base, which is, as we can all see, is quite evident today, not as reliable and as available as it should be, to pivot away from that to low and no carbon forms of electricity generation. As we saw after the announcement at COP26, there are a number of lender countries who are available to provide South Africa and Eskom in particular with concessional financing to enable such a transition to be put in place. This will not only allow us to contribute to significantly reducing the carbon footprint of our electricity industry, but it will also allow us as a country to remain competitive, particularly with the looming imposition of carbon border import duties by the European Union, which are mooted from 2023 onwards. Eskom therefore welcomes additional renewable energy to be added to the grid, and it's for exactly that purpose, as Sikonati has mentioned, that we have made available land in Mpumalanga in order to avail grid access to investors on an accelerated basis so that we can get this zero carbon generation capacity on the grid as quickly as possible. Thanks, Sikonati. Back to you.
I would like to bring Monde Bala back, please, onto the camera. Monde, can you tell the people what is the situation with regards to eThekwini municipality, which was hit hard by the floods? Are we load shedding there, and how much power is the municipality able to receive? Thank you. And while on that, Monde, can you say if any other parts of KwaZulu-Natal are being are working with Eskom with regards to load shedding? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sikonati. Just on the issue of eThekwini, on average, eThekwini takes about 1,600 megawatts. That's on a normal day. Currently, with the floods, we've seen that reduced to just over 900 megawatts. So, which then means that there's about 600 to 700 odd megawatts that is currently on outage. The Eskom teams are working, are supporting the eThekwini municipality to try and restore supply to the affected areas. We are also supporting other parts of eThekwini, to be specific as well, because that's also the second hardest hit area. Just on the load shedding situation around eThekwini is Sikonati. We require just over 600 megawatts for load shedding. So that 600 megawatts is currently what is out. So we've made an arrangement with eThekwini to cushion the blow of load shedding. Obviously now with this change to stage 4, that changes the picture somewhat, but we continue with the discussion with eThekwini to see how best we can support them, specifically during load shedding. As for the rest of KZN, the areas that were affected were mainly eThekwini in the main, going up the coast towards the north coast, and also in the south coast. From an Eskom perspective, we have not experienced serious damage to our infrastructure, and as such, then we have availed our teams to support the different municipalities in the main eThekwini to deal with the issues that they are currently dealing with. Thank you, Sikonati.
Before you go, Monde, just in summary, eThekwini municipality is currently not being load shed. Am I correct?
That is the current arrangement, Sikonati. We are not load shedding eThekwini at the moment because largely because the amount of load that is currently out on outage is almost equal to what would have required from their load shedding sort of blocks. So on the base of that, the arrangement that we've had with eThekwini is that we will not load shed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bele. The next set of questions comes from Terence Creamer of Engineering News. Does the standard offer serve as a replacement for the STPP that could not be concluded? If so, how will Eskom pay for the standard offer contracts? Andre, please, will you tackle that?
Thanks, Sikonati, and thanks, Terence, for that question. No, the standard offer is not a replacement. As you know, the short-term power purchase program was cancelled. It could not be concluded. But the idea is for us to enter into these standard offer agreements, and through the normal cost recovery agreements, and hence the requirement for concurrence from NERSA, that in fact, if we do buy power under the standard offer, that we are able to recover it in the tariff. If we don't have that assurance, then obviously it would not be in Eskom's interest, and we would be even more out of pocket if we were to enter into these contracts. So we now need Section 34 determination for the standard offer, and then we also require exemption from certain provisions of BBBEE requirements that historically apply, and then we should be able to launch that standard offer to the market, and hopefully we can get that as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. The next question comes from Jonisai Wachald Maromo from Independent Newspapers, Independent Online. I want to ask Andre, with the persistent rains, how bad is it looking for Eskom consumers? The social media discussions about higher blackout stages, are they imminent? Jonisai, allow me to answer those, please. Sekhomoto Skippers has just given us the worst possible outlook for load shedding during the winter. And he said that's at the extreme end at 101 days during this year that we might have load shedding. Let us now leave the social media discussions to social media. I can confirm that Eskom has up to stage 8 load shedding that can be implemented should the need arise. Philip Tugashe has already answered the question about this week, that we do not foresee the possibility of stage 6 load shedding being implemented. I shall move on to Velemseni Mtiane. Practically speaking, what will it take to stop load shedding? As Eskom executives, do you have technical know-how and capacity of what it takes to deal decisively with load shedding? Does those mean Eskom has no ability to withstand high demand due to cold weather and rain? Velemseni Mtiane is from SABC News. Andre, please, can you tackle those questions?
Thanks, Velemseni. Load shedding can be stopped if we add additional generation capacity to the grid. I've been consistently saying this since the 31st of January of 2020, when I joined Eskom. It became very clear to me very early on that the only sustainable permanent solution to addressing load shedding is to add new generation capacity to the tune of 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts of new capacity. And of course, load shedding is not a new phenomenon. It has now regrettably been part of the South African landscape for about 18 years. And it dates back to a long history of decisions that were not taken at the time that they should have been taken to add on new capacity. When the decision was eventually taken to build Medupi and Kusile, some 9 years after Eskom originally highlighted the need for new capacity to be added, this was too late, and because of the fact that these plants were then built under a lot of pressure, we were designing the plants even as we were building them, which of course is not nearly good engineering practice. We then built into those plants a number of design defects, and the projects really did not deliver either on budget or on schedule or on the quality of the output that we expected from them, because of the great rush in which they had to be built, because of the reason that we were compelled by policy decisions at the time to refrain from adding much needed new capacity to the grid. Now, what the response of Eskom was at the time was to carry out less maintenance than should have been carried out in order to keep the plant running smoothly. Calculations at the time, going back to about 2003, 2004, show that we should have taken out 13% of our capacity on planned maintenance as a minimum. And we should have ideally taken out 18%. As a matter of fact, only in 2016 and 2017, and then from 2021 onwards, did we even manage to take out more than 10%. And all the other years, we significantly under-maintained. So in other words, we maintained less than half of the capacity that we should have maintained. And this maintenance backlog is really what has caused the significant lack of reliability and availability that we currently see evidenced in stage 4 load shedding. So the answer to the question is we need more capacity to be added to the grid as soon as possible, and we should remove all roadblocks that stand in the way of adding that capacity as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Andre, for dealing decisively with that set of questions. Antoinette Slavet from a report wants to know, what is the current demand out of KwaZulu-Natal, and how does that compare with normal demand from that province? Antoinette, Monde has extensively answered that question. I hope by now you have your answer. Terence Creamer of Engineering News again wants to know, has Eskom made a formal call to arms to its shareholder department and policy department? What has been the response to that call? Andre, please just revisit your response again to that.
Thanks, Terence. We have repeatedly engaged with our shareholder department. The shareholder department, of course, is our channel through which we communicate with other government departments. That's just the protocol of being a state-owned enterprise. So we have highlighted the opportunities and the challenges that we've had, and there is an extensive and ongoing dialogue taking place between Eskom and the Department of Public Enterprises. And I've got no doubt that when we communicate, as we do with officials at the DMRE, that these same messages are also conveyed to them. So I think the steps that are required to resolve the crisis are known. They have been communicated, and we have, I think, again, emphasized the need for urgency on that score. Apart from that, Terence, again, I would suggest that you direct further questions for clarification to the relevant government departments, who will be better placed to answer those particular questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Andre. Philip, please can I ask you to answer this question? In fact, the next two questions. From Antoinette Slavet, have the private OCGTs been affected by the floods in KwaZulu-Natal, or can they provide support at normal levels? OCGT, ladies and gentlemen, is open cycle gas turbines. Puleli Shwiti Jones from ENCA wants to know, the demand for electricity is expected to be high in winter. Are there any plans to ensure load shedding won't take place on a consistent level? Philip?
Thanks, Sikonati. So very briefly on the OCGTs owned by IPPs. No, we're not seeing any major deviations. I think they've, similar to us, they've made their contingency plans, and those plans are working. So we don't see any significant changes in terms of supply of diesel and then their utilization. And then in terms of demand in winter, I think Sikonati has dealt with part of that. So again, as generation, we have sorry, not Sikonati, Sekgomotso. We have a plan in terms of when we're going to be doing maintenance. We have a plan that talks to the demand, the expected demand during that period of time. And we always try to match our availability with that demand. And it's when things don't work out, like now, when there are more failures, sometimes when the demand is higher, but consistently when there are more failures than we have planned, then that's when we run into problems. So yes, we have plans to really meet the demand and to minimize the impact on the system. But again, because our system, our plants are not as reliable as we would like them, those plans often fail, and we are hoping that, as Sekgomotso said, that will be within the parameters that we've communicated already. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. The next question from Puleli Shwiti-Jones from ENCA. A report in 2019 by Bees Tracers commissioned by Eskom suggested that there was sabotage at the Tutuka power station, which disturbed electricity supply. The very same unit affected now. Has Eskom seen this report, and why has there been no action against some of the officials fingered in the scathing report? Does sabotage remain a problem? Pule, this particular question we have dealt with before. I am under the impression that I did send you a response on this. If not, I will happily send the response to you. This was in 2019, and Eskom management became aware of such a report that had been commissioned at power station level. And the report only became known to the head office after the particular power station manager had been suspended. Up until that point, Eskom did not know anything about it. When you say that particular unit at Tutuka has been affected currently, I don't know which unit you are referring to, but we have, over the past 12 months at least, has been a steady news from a stream of news from Eskom about Tutuka power station, including the discovery of some cartels that were actually stealing fuel oil from that power station, and coal, and indeed other supplies. There have been arrests on that. So that power station is amongst currently those that are very poorly performing and is on a recovery mode. We have the current management team doing everything they can, such that they have now returned 3 generation units to service, which by no means are stable at this point as well. So yes, there is a lot of work going on there, and I will again revisit the response that I thought I did send you on this matter. Do you have anything that you wish to add to this, Andre or Philip, please? Or on just Tutuka in general?
I think the only thing to add, Sikonati, is that Tutuka is our worst performing station. It has really been very badly affected by corruption, and we've recently seen the suspension of some 20 managers at that station. 2 arrests have been made, and we continue to pursue inquiries with a view to bringing further people suspected of crime to book. But given the neglect that has taken place at that station, it is a long, hard road to recover that station. Philip, I think that's pretty much the gist of it. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, Andre, I was going to come in, but I think you've adequately covered it. Thanks.
Graham Bell from Tech News wants to know what long-term plans are being put in place to prevent coal from getting wet. Philip?
So this is a challenge that we have every rainy season. The plans that we have, which are part of the 9-point plan, this is where we would have strategic coal, and this coal will be protected and will make sure that it does not get wet. So this coal will be stored separately. And this is a practice that started quite some time ago in Eskom. Now, that has served us well. However, as you can imagine, this area where we store the strategic coal, it would be limited, say, to about 5 days, maybe maximum of 7 days coal. So when it rains, you will then use that coal, and that coal will then serve you. But as you then exhaust that coal and start moving into your normal coal stockyard, that's where the challenge is, where you're now starting to reclaim coal far from where a conveyor belt that is covered will be running. And you're using yellow plant, you're using front-end loaders and so on. And that's where the challenge would be when you're recovering that coal, which is relatively far from where you are running the covered conveyor belts. And that coal will then be exposed to the rain, and we would then have the problem with rain, wet coal. So what we do is we need to make sure, or we make sure that the coal stockyard is well maintained, that it is draining properly. And then we also have specialists in this area that would visit stations and give advice. For instance, when you're reclaiming that coal, when you've now exhausted your dry coal, when you are reclaiming far from where you are running your conveyor belts, how do you do it in such a way that you minimize that coal getting wet? So those are the challenges, and one of the things that we are looking at now is to increase the capacity of the strategic coal and have more coal that can be protected. It's a major challenge because, as I said, the biggest issue would be the distance from where you are running covered coal conveyors. Our coal stockyards are not covered because these are vast areas, and it would be, it was never planned for them to be covered. So that is where we are, and that's what we will be moving into to see how we can increase the capacity of this, because the rain it's unpredicted in terms of how it is behaving. To have sustained rainy weather for more than 5 days, 7 days, it's not something that we've really had in the past. So that is what we'll be looking at. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. I have a question from Thando Maiko of Business Day. What is the update on the investigations on sabotage at Lesolle Power Station? 2, has Eskom recouped any monies lost through state capture? 3, she's not sure if she missed the answer to this question, but what is the forecast for winter regarding load shedding? And last year, South Africa experienced its highest number of days for load shedding. Thando, with regards to your first question about the sabotage at Lesolle Power Station, this case was reported to the Hawks at the time, and we did provide confirmation of such a complaint to the Hawks, to the media, and the investigations are being handled by the Hawks. So we do not have any update on that at this point. Has Eskom recouped any monies lost through state capture? Again, we have consistently assured and produced statements and information to the public with regards to this. Eskom has recovered some money from Deloitte. Eskom has recovered some money from ABB, and Eskom has recovered some money from McKinsey, amongst others. That amounts to, those 3 recoveries are over 2.6 billion rand over the years. As you do know, again, we have consistently kept the country informed about a civil lawsuit against former Eskom executives in the form of 3.8 billion rand, and there is another suit against a company called Trillion Management that is still ongoing. There are other cases that may yet be brought, that will certainly be brought against other implicated parties through the courts. These are civil lawsuits that I am talking about, and indeed settlements with those companies that have agreed to settle and pay back the money. With regards to criminal prosecutions for fraud and other corruption, there has only been arrests in one case, and those 4 individuals, including 2 former Eskom executives, are going through the court process in the criminal proceedings. There are again other moves to recover monies from those in a civil case. Sekgomotso has extensively answered the question about the extent of load shedding. I shall move on to Lamis, your question, how many days of load shedding have we had this year? That I can answer briefly. In financial 2022, which is the year starting the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022, the year just ended, we have had 65 days of load shedding. Vali Padayachi wants to know, is Eskom leadership, especially generation, comfortable that it currently has all the competences to address a serious generation-related situation like this in-house? If there are gaps, and given the agency, would Eskom be amenable to bringing in outside or external resources in a prudent and focused manner to fill such gaps if they have been identified? Not as a think tank, but persons with real generation operational experience, so-called greybeards, to fill such competency gap on a short-term basis. That's Vali Padiachi. Andre, Philip, thank you.
If I can go first, and I'm sure Andre can add, a blunt answer, Vali, is no. We are not comfortable that we've got the competencies. Eskom over a number of years, and certainly recent months, we have lost a number of experienced people, and we are well below where we should be, and we've lost a number of experienced people. So certainly we are not where we should be in terms of competence. We have, and we've now done this twice on an urgent basis. We've declared an emergency and we brought in skills. It's nowhere close to where we should be. And we are currently working on also doing something similar, but on a much broader scale, where we need to supplement the Eskom resources with additional experienced resources. So we certainly are working on that, and we should be going out very soon to try and do that. So yes, definitely, we do need additional skilled resources as our plant gets old. We need experienced and skilled people. And at this stage, no, we do not have enough of that, but we are working on that. We have had some success in doing that, but it's nowhere close to being adequate. Thanks.
You want to add anything to that, Andre?
Thanks, Sikonati. Philip covered it well.
Thank you. The next set of questions then. Colleagues, we are trying to close this now at this briefing at 11 o'clock. So we will do everything to take the remaining questions as quickly as we can. Carol Payton of Fin24, News 24 wants to know what is precisely Eskom requesting of National Treasury with regards to the PFMA, and what does it suggest could be cut out or minimized in terms of distributed generation red tape. Briefly as well, Andre, can you tell the public where Jan Oberholzer is? Antoinette Slava wants to know. Thank you.
Mr. Oberholzer is traveling on business and could not make the call today. Carol, with regard to PFMA, as well as triple PFA, you may have seen that there was recently a gazetted exemption published in the Government Gazette for Transnet to exempt it from certain provisions, and essentially what we're asking for is exactly the same exemption in order to allow us to procure equipment directly from original equipment manufacturers instead of having to go through non-value adding intermediaries. We believe that there is a significant cost saving as well as an efficiency gain if we were able to do that. Also to give us greater latitude in order to expand and extend certain contracts that we have so that we can be more efficient without having to go through long and onerous procurement processes, all obviously having due regard to good governance and ensuring that we spend Eskom's money as wisely as possible. Thank you, Sikonati.
Edward Bottomley, I will skip your questions and will request my colleagues to take them down and get you a response from the business. We will do everything we can to limit this to load shedding. So I will take Naledi Ngobo's questions. She is from the SABC. Will we continue to be on stage 4 till Thursday, Friday, or can we expect levels to come down before load shedding is lifted on Friday? Naledi, that decision will depend on what happens with the units that are currently out, and you can trust us to inform you as promptly as possible if there are any changes. The next one comes again from Tando Maiko. What is Tutuka's energy availability factor? Please give an update on investigations on fraud and corruption relating to fuel oil procurement. Philip, only tell us, please, what is Tutuka's EAF, if you have that number right away?
So for the financial year that ended at the end of March, it was around 30%. And if you add planned maintenance, it's about 36%. It's equivalent of 2 units. So it's EAF, it's about 30%.
Thank you, Philip. Tando, we have dealt with a question about fraud and investigations in that there has been no feedback as yet from the authorities, and we are pursuing what charges can be pursued both internally and through the justice system. When there is anything to be said about that, we will really let you know. The question from this guest, and that's Paul Richardson of Bloomberg. What is currently available, current available capacity? Could you confirm how much is at risk? Paul, we really started exactly with that at the beginning of this conversation, and we will release the recording as soon as possible. Andre started with those numbers. Pule of ENCA says there seems to be a worrying concern of sabotage at the power stations. It may be no secret, however. Does this raise a concern about the strength of security at most of these power stations where cartels and perpetrators are disturbing generation supply? That's from Pule from ENCA. Andre, the last one as well that you might want to take as we close this is from Clyde Mellinson. Please take that together with Pule's questions. What are the steps that could be taken by DMRE that would enable Eskom to conduct its own emergency procurement or indeed new build program? Andre?
Thank you very much. Pule, yeah, as always, we are very cautious to try sabotage when it comes to interruptions, but there are certainly very good signs that we have significant criminal activity at a number of our power stations. You may be aware that at Tutuka Power Station, during the last financial year, ended 31st of March 2021, we had to write off 1.3 billion rand in spares at Tutuka Power Stations, where we simply couldn't find the spares, suggesting that the money had been misappropriated. We're also aware of collusion taking place between people with maintenance contracts, maintenance management, and coal suppliers in order to, for example, disrupt the operation of mills by adding very hard objects to the supply of coal into a mill in order to ensure that that mill breaks and that the maintenance contractor can then come in and repair. And these are a few of the examples that we have identified where we have suffered damage due to criminal activity. We have stepped up our security at our power stations. We now have people on the floor at our power stations patrolling regularly. It's not an ideal situation. We are conducting various investigations into continued corruption that takes place, particularly in generation procurement, regrettably, and we will be taking steps to progress further on that in order to eradicate this particular phenomenon from generation, because it is really contributing to unreliable generation capacity when people are focused more on stealing than on doing their jobs. Clyde, to answer your question, I think that there are a number of regulatory changes that can be made. For example, easier regulatory approvals, the Section 4 determination that needs to accompany any new plant, alignment with the Integrated Resource Plan 2019. There are, I think, a number of decisions that are at the disposal of the policy department. I'm sure that they are considering it, and staying very firmly in my lane, I will leave that particular question to be answered by the DMRE rather than to try and speculate what is being contemplated by the policy department. With that, colleagues, we have reached the end of our list of questions. As Sikonati said, we will make available the recording as soon as it's available. For those who joined late and may have missed some of the generation update that we gave at the beginning, you may be able to glean some answers there. Let's get back to fixing the power stations. If you'll allow us, we now need to go and do some real work. Thank you very much, and we can give you the assurance that we are working as hard as we can to bring those units back and relieve load shedding as soon as we can. Thank you. We are adjourned.